Slavery and Jim Crow. Slaves were first brought to America in 1619. These human beings are treated like animals, being denied their basic freedoms and liberties, being forced to work, and not getting paid for it. By the Constitutional Convention in 1787, there are people that dislike slavery, but not enough to have a meaningful impact. You can see this division across America regarding which states have slavery and which states don't. The Supreme Court is going to look at slavery in America in the court case Dred Scott v. Sanford in 1857. Dred Scott is a slave. He's taken from a slave state to a free territory. He says, hey, I can't be a slave anymore. There's no slavery here, right? Wrong, says the Supreme Court. Dred Scott is a slave. Slaves are property. Property can't even sue in court. What is a slave doing here, they said. After this case, slavery is viewed as legal in the entire United States. You can't have free states or free territories anymore. This court case is going to infuriate people living in northern states. The Republican Party is going to form at this time, and this party wants to stop the spread of slavery. And the Republican Party's candidate, Abraham Lincoln, is going to be elected President of the United States in 1860, which leads to the South seceding from the United States and starting the Civil War. In 1863, Abraham Lincoln's going to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, which is going to free the slaves in the rebellious southern states. This essentially ends slavery in the United States. There's still a little bit of slavery in the northern states, but it's not going to be there for long. Reconstruction was a difficult period. They had to figure out how to bring the South back into the United States. What was the fairest way to do this? What would it look like? This is where the Reconstruction Amendments come into play. The 13th Amendment states that slavery shall not exist within the United States. The 14th Amendment has a citizenship clause that states people born in the United States are citizens. Now all those former slaves are considered citizens under the eyes of the Constitution. Man, this 14th has the citizenship clause, the due process clause, equal protection clause. It's almost like this thing is really important or something. The 15th Amendment states the right to vote shall not be denied on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. Reconstruction is an extremely difficult time period. You got the South that doesn't want to change its ways, you have limited time, money, and resources, and a national government that doesn't always agree with itself. Congress is going to pass the Civil Rights Act of 1875, which President Johnson is going to veto. And then Congress is going to override that veto so that the Civil Rights Act of 1875 still becomes law. But in 1883, the Supreme Court is going to declare the Civil Rights Act of 1875 is unconstitutional. Holy checks and balances, Batman! In 1877, the Reconstruction period ends when the North stops occupying the southern states. Unfortunately for the former slaves, these Reconstruction Amendments or Civil War Amendments are not going to be enforced in Southern society. The Jim Crow Era. Jim Crow refers to laws in Southern states segregating things such as public schools, railroads, restaurants, and theaters. In the South, it's going to be common to separate society by a person's race. Pictures like this mislead people into thinking that there's always two water fountains. Oftentimes you had to walk blocks and blocks to find a colored water fountain. Look how controlling some of these crazy laws are. Unlawful for different races to play cards, to be handcuffed to each other when they're in prison. Black barber can't cut white women's hair. This is insane stuff. The right to vote given African Americans is viewed as way too powerful for racist Southern society. So they pass laws like you have to pass a literacy test in order to vote. Well, it was illegal to teach a slave how to read, so yeah, most of the former slaves don't know how to read yet. Wait a minute, what about white people that don't know how to read? The racist South is prepared. They pass grandfather clauses which exempts you from having to be able to read if your grandfather voted in previous elections. The South passed a law it was illegal to vote unless you paid a poll tax, paying money in order to vote. Let me think. You make $0 an hour for hundreds of years. How much money do you have saved up? Nothing. The South passed laws you have to own property in order to vote. Hard to buy property when you've been paid $0 an hour. There are successful African Americans in the late 1800s, but if you are in the South, that's not seen as good enough to be treated equally. Unfortunately, blacks are going to face a lot of violence and intimidation. Formed in 1865, the Ku Klux Klan, or the KKK, would extend to almost every southern state by 1870. They would attack schools, churches, anywhere they could to put forth fear in the African American population. A death by hanging is also known as lynching, and this is what some people face that were trying to obtain voting rights, that were trying to be treated equally, that stood up for themselves. They were seen as troublemakers, and these people would be killed. These lynchings are not government sanctioned. This is just people in the society deciding, oh, this is what we need to do, like a real mob rule mentality. It's absolutely disgusting how a group of people can be so fearful of others just for being different. Plessy versus Ferguson is a Supreme Court case from 1896. Plessy was arrested for sitting in a whites-only section of a railway car. And Plessy's lawyers are going to argue this breaks the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. The Supreme Court rules that separate but equal is constitutional. The court claims segregation does not go against the 14th Amendment. This will fuel segregation in Southern society over the next 50 or 60 years. Alright, so this video was kind of depressing. Obviously, it's good that we got rid of slavery, and it was cool that we got these Civil War Reconstruction Amendments, but it's not cool how they were ignored and how the South became deeply segregated. I have to urge you to watch the next video where the United States can turn this thing around.